Hi, everybody. My name is Laura O'Connor. I am CFMA's membership director, and I'm here with Sal Marino.
Hi, everybody. I'm the managing editor for CFMA Building Profits and the director of communications. Welcome to Behind the Pages, page 3.
We also have Lindsay Sullivan with us. She's running behind the scenes for us. And our author today is Tori Terrell, CCIFP. Thank you, Tori, for being here with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So today we're going to talk about a scenario that can happen faster than anyone wants to admit. When a normal crunch quietly becomes a full-blown financial crisis. In the article, the company had a $3 million line of credit and only $300,000 available, with payroll AP deadlines closing in. That's not just stress, that's a countdown. Tori, I want to start right in that moment. Can you jump in?
Sure. So that takes me back about a decade ago. At that time, I was just sitting as the AP manager, but I was also the primary person for compiling our cash flow projections. Mind you, this was prior to me finding CFMA and the mentors that I now have as a result. But yeah, cash flow was the tightest it had ever been, with no sign of relief in sight to me. So I knew something was bad.
If somebody thinks this would not happen to us, what is the first sign that they would see something is wrong?
So I would have to say, if you have that thought, tell yourself you need to have a game plan just in case. One job can tank the business really fast. At this point in time, we had been in business for 30 years. So it's not a timing thing. It can happen at really any point.
Yeah. So, Tori, what do you wish you had known maybe 60 days earlier in this scenario?
Goodness, 60 days earlier, probably would have just wanted to know that everything was going to be okay.
Yeah.
No need to panic. It was going to take a lot of work, but that, the team would come together and we would dig our way back out of it.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what the team did first? Gather facts, call the bank, or triage cash? How did that work?
So the first thing that really happened was, yeah, all hands on deck meeting, and we were sending our cash flow report around once a week once it was compiled, but we ended up starting a in-person meeting to go over it. Any help that needed, to be handed off, we assigned to get, cash coming in the door any sooner than we could get it. Previously, making sure we had AP projections, as tight as possible. So that was one of the first things that we did implement at that time that kind of pushed us in the right direction. We were also looking outside of the company for a consultant to help us to improve our um, monthly job costing routine. And so we made contacts for that as well.
Okay. Very nice. Um, if a company only checks one thing monthly, what do you think it should be?
Goodness. To me, it's are you overbilled or underbilled? You need to know that.
Okay. Yeah. Should we do a poll?
Sure, we can do
Poll
the
time.
poll.
Let's do a poll.
Lindsay, can you get the poll up for us? Do you close internal financials by the 15th of each month, yes or no? And if you have a different answer, you can drop that right in the chat.
Good poll.
Give everybody another minute. All right. Want to share the results?
Yes, looks like 67% of people said yes. And Susan said, we're working on 15th of the month close. So yeah, looks like most people do the 15th.
Any other chat questions coming up?
Not at the moment, no. Yeah, anyone feel free to drop your questions or anything you'd like us to address in the chat right there, and I'll let everyone know.
Yep,
Awesome.
and no judgment either way. The point is to see how easy it is for the financial picture to show up too late. So that's kind of the purpose.
All right, so let's rewind a little bit. The numbers were alarming, right, Tori? But the real story is what allowed the numbers to get that far without everyone sort of seeing it clearly. And this, I think, this is where a lot of contractors recognize themselves, not because they're careless, but operations move really fast and finance can fall behind. So let's unpack what created that blind spot. In your view, what were the two or three process gaps that created the perfect storm were in your scenario?
Sure. So kind of thinking of the blind spot question, what comes to my mind first is in construction, we're a really competitive group, right? We want to win. We don't want to be wrong. Um, Estimating could have had a miss. Project management, could have set up the schedule of values where they couldn't get billed ahead. Accounting might have entered invoices that had the wrong accounting date, which will affect job costing and billing projections. So first of all, we got to be honest when these things happen, and we can just come together and strategize for success. But aside from that, at that point in time, we had some really, really uh, long timed projects. They had been multi-year projects, and they were obviously large as a result. And so we had really large retainage due to us. And it hit at a time where here in our local economy, we had one of the lowest on record years where, just even the level of jobs that were out to bid was the lowest it had ever been in our history. We had also kind of strayed slightly from our niche and our main focus. We had taken on a project that was out of town, and we had also taken on a new type of work. So both of those jobs actually led to our loss, and we didn't have other projects that we had time to bid and start to increase the revenue for the year.
Okay. So if they're not doing monthly job reviews and publishing internal financials or using formal AP, AR cutoffs, what was the biggest multiplier you think and why?
Well, you might think I'm going to pick on project management here, but actually it was accounting to me. Accounting has to have these hard cutoffs because that's really the starting point that gets the ball rolling. And our company just really has to have accurate data from that point in time.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sure. I have a question from the chat from Philip. He's asking, most companies only do a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast when there is a crisis and the bank makes them. In the 10 years since your story, have you made that a more visible and regularly used tool for your teams?
So for me personally, I did not implement that right away. As you can imagine, going back a decade and starting to roll forward, technology has been increasing at a really rapid pace. So I have worked really hard on a very dialed in 4 to 6 week look ahead cash projection. Of course, in the system, we have the ability for additional data. But for me personally, I didn't switch out to a hard 13-week look ahead. In the last year, I have adopted some software technology that has a lot of assumptions built into the background that does give me a cash flow outlay that has been very helpful. I will say you have to look at that though with a grain of salt because things certainly do change and your job schedules affect that immensely.
Yeah.
Can I? Oh, go ahead.
I have another one from the chat. Gerardo asks, how often are you meeting with and or talking to your banker?
Well, at that time, we did not meet with or talk to that banker very often at all. There really wasn't a close relationship, which, I want to highlight was also a really big issue.
Yeah.
The banker that we chose, we would always meet quarterly. We would have some sort of a connection monthly when I would send over our financials, but an in-person meeting quarterly, going over financials, going over backlog, and just enjoying each other's company at that point. So, and the same is true now. My current banker, is a part of actually my CFMA chapter. So we see each other very regularly. But quarterly, we are meeting to discuss the financials and the backlog.
Very nice.
So let's continue that talking about banking. So when a bank calls an urgent meeting, it's rarely about just 1 month. It's about the confidence and the story behind the numbers. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I've never been on the banking side, so I don't know if one of our bankers online here wants to chime in, but to me, they have a responsibility too, right? They've told someone our story and now they have to pivot. And some banks have worked with some banks that I have worked with have been very data driven and some have been very relationship driven. I personally think a good balance of the two is really the most desired because in the end, the facts are friendly. But the covenants are the covenants. And so you've got to be able to negotiate those and know, what is reasonable for your business and find that partner that's familiar and supports your reasonableness. But yeah, I believe in that moment, the bank is just thinking of, or this bank was just thinking to protect the bank.
Yeah. Tori, where do you think the big projections usually hide? Like WIP accuracy, receivables timing, job level forecasting. Where do you think the largest swings usually are?
I think in your forecast, so if you are, giving projections to the bank for the next year, your start dates on your projects are really important. And unfortunately, in construction, they're one of the hardest things for us to predict ahead of time.
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone would agree with that too, and it makes estimating life difficult as well. But yeah, it's really the starting of those projects and when you're going to be able to have your schedule of values in place in a way that you can get your couple bills in, even trying to get billed ahead up front.
If you had to pick one habit to prevent covenant surprises, what would it be?
Absolutely having your monthly dashboard.
Yeah.
Knowing what those covenants are, having it connected to whatever ratios in the system to pull that data, and have the ability that if you're going to have some capital improvements that you can go in and test that to see what it's going to do to those covenants.
Yeah. Anything in the chat that we should?
David commented, permits are always delayed. I assume 1 to 2 months. So.
Yeah.
Let's see. So okay, when you're monthly monitoring, who owns that? What department, does it sit? Who's involved in that process for it to be successful?
Or our monthly close process.
Monitor.
Yeah.
So at my company, that's me, making sure that AR has their cutoff, AP has their cutoff, bills are in, that operations is having their job review meetings, so that job cost accountant can have the WIP schedule with the proposed, WIP adjustments to me in time for us to have that entered for reasonableness and close on the 15th.
It's a lot of areas to coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is there a question in the chat?
So something.
Yes, I have a question here from Ross. Do they utilize FP&A/scenario modeling software to help with the dashboard metrics cash flow projections? If yes, which ones and what ERP do they use to integrate those data sets with?
So we're not using any external software at the moment. We have an in-house guru who has programming background. So he was able to build our dashboards using our own data right on an SSRS platform. So we have access to run that at any time. And then the software that we're using is Sage 300 at the moment. And we're in the middle of an implementation to Intact.
Nice. So the bank reaction compresses time, and now you need a lender, essentially, right, who understands construction and a system that produces credible numbers. One of the most practical ideas, I think, in your article is that the right bank is not always the biggest bank. It's the bank that understands the job, right? So you also show that switching banks is real work. It adds pressure at the exact moment. The team already feels completely maxed out. So you highlight choosing a banker with construction controller experience. What were the green flags that signaled this person gets it?
Yeah, so she really understood retainage on long-term projects. She had, because again, she'd been a controller for a subcontractor. She understood the WIP report. She knew what the different elements of it meant. She understood job financing, especially as being a subcontractor, that we had to wait for payments from our owners to be released to general contractor and then to us. And the bank overall knew the contractors that we did a lot of work for. And so that those were all the kind of green flags that we noticed.
Yeah.
And we knew also that, we had an element of responsibility in this whole situation as well. And so we had to tighten up processes. Looking at the data, we had receivables owed to us, so the long-term retainage and timing to bill for that. We knew we needed a partner that could support us, and we knew we needed to work on quicker data visibility and a monthly regime.
Nice.
I have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
Both David and Brian are asking about the transition to Sage. David asks, what's behind your transition from Sage 300 to Sage Intact? And Brian asked how the implementation is going.
So there's multiple reasons for our decision to transition. Of course, one is a lot of people hear that Sage 300 will be sunsetting at some point, so why wait until the last minute? I'm not one that's afraid of change. I am one of our change makers here, so I've been pushing for this for a while, not just to do it, but to do it at the right time and with a lot of methodical and logical reasoning behind it. A big reason is to move into the cloud, to get away from on-site server maintenance, downtime, etc., backups. That's one big thing. We appreciate the software, the technology built into it, the improvements, the streamlining, the efficiency, the ease of reporting. There's going to be multiple benefits to all of our departments. And the implementation is going, I would say, well. We had a few setbacks because we utilized quite a few third-party applications, and just the organizing of getting those TPAs ready to have their software connected to our new implementation is taking a little bit longer for some of them than what we had originally anticipated. So we originally had a December 1st go live date. We've rolled that back now. And then with the first release of the year for Intact, there were a couple new features that we're digging into that might require some additional programming from those third parties. So we're investigating that right now, but we're not in a hurry. We did not have a deadline to make this implementation. We want to build the system out correctly, more importantly than just meeting the go live date. So.
Another question from Philip. How widely do you share your dashboard? For example, do you share it with the project managers so they can have a more holistic view on how the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis and the effects the company as a whole? Or is the dashboard solely a finance department tool?
Good question. So I would say the project managers have a specialized dashboard in the current forecasting software that we own. They can see all of the big ticket items in their dashboard just at a glance to know, are they billed ahead? Are they billed behind? Are they meeting budget? Where are they not meeting budget? where do they need to focus their attention on, which has been huge. And I'm a big supporter of, these personalized dashboards that the data makes sense to that department. Quarterly, I share the company financials, which does include some of our dashboard KPIs so that they have the big picture financially. But on a month-to-month basis, it's much more personalized to the department overall. And of course, leadership's got access to the full dashboard anytime they want to look at it.
Very nice.
Yeah, we have a lot more stuff in the chat.
Sweet.
Brandon has another comment. He says, ask the bank or partner for client references, 3 to 4. Their willingness to provide those introductions is always telling. And then we have a question from Artie. We're in the process of hiring a controller. We've never had a role like this in the company. Any tips or suggestions to make sure they excel in this role?
Tell them to join CFMA.
There you go. Yeah,
and hire one that is already involved with CFMA or has their CCIFP. And if they don't, just encourage them to get involved with CFMA. Hopefully, since you're watching this webinar, you already are. But that is some of the best advice a subcontractor in our area has given at an annual dinner. He said, on a subcontract pre-qual, they were asked, what associations is your company a part of? And he called them up to ask why they were asking that. And they said, well, it's because we have found the best in class contractors are involved in trade associations. So that has just really stuck with me. So that's that would be my biggest advice. And that the person is willing to be taught. If there's someone in-house that's going to be teaching them, that's super important. And contact your CPA, the CPA firm that you've already hired. Ask them to be a part of this hire, because if you're not on the finance side, you don't really know what to look for in your hire. Lean on your CPA to give you some insight and to be a part of that interview process. That's actually how I got this role here, is through this crisis. I was working behind the scenes with the CPA during the audit, and they saw my potential before I knew my potential. Again, at the time, I was just an AP manager. They saw me doing high-level things that I hadn't connected all the dots on. And when the time became available, it was actually my CPA that approached the president of the company and said, hey, you've got what you need right here. She just needs some mentoring. And so I got that mentoring and I joined CFMA, and here we are. So that would really be my biggest piece of advice.
Great advice.
Yeah. Speaking of your CPA, Gerardo had a question about that. Is your CPA a key advisor? Do they prepare reviewed or audited financials for your organization?
So over time, that has changed a lot. In the beginning, we absolutely needed them as that advisor, and they've always been available as that advisor. We've kind of slowly weaned off of that just because the level of our accounting department here, and being willing to keep up with trainings and to utilize all of the education, especially from CFMA. We haven't had to depend on them as greatly, but at any point that we need them, they are definitely a huge partner and an asset to our company.
I've got one more still in here.
Okay.
From Katie, what forecasting software do you use?
So the one that I am currently using is from Atlas CFO. So you can look them up if you want. I've definitely looked at Pronovos, and some of the baked in things into Intact look like they're going to give us very similar data. So those would be my recommendations.
Yeah, I love that we're getting a lot of comments and questions. I've gone through most of them for now, but anyone else wants to pop one in the chat, I'm happy to read them as we go.
I thought I saw someone raise their hand, so if you could check into that.
Raise their hand.
But while we're investigating, I wanted to take you back to the beginning, something that I heard you say when you discovered about the crisis, that people needed to be honest. And I thought that was, really interesting. And I wanted to know how you, encourage psychological safety with your team. And, that's not always easy for people. And it's the best way to get going to solve the problem, right? But how do you, encourage your team to be comfortable with, acknowledging the elephant in the room and tackling it?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is just built on trust. So anything you do to increase trust builders, it's as simple as, hey, let's go take a walk around the building. Um, we encourage all kinds of wellness here at this company. We've worked over the last couple years, especially on, wellness all the way around. So we have team members that, they take a break, they go walk around the building 2 or 3 times, go to lunch with folks, go to lunch with your leadership team once a quarter. Um, just because you work side by side with someone doesn't mean that you actually get to know them on a level where you do trust them when you need to walk in their office and say, we have a really big problem. um, so it's really the little steps that lead up to that, that level of comfort that you can sit around a table and you can not point the blame at any person and you're all just focused on solving the problem.
What if leadership is nervous or scared about sharing bad news? Any advice there?
People want to be told because, like that saying, in the absence of information, they're going to make up their own.
Yeah.
So it's much better that you're giving that information and you're being transparent and they're not needing to make up their own story. And so, just making sure that you're sharing that information so it alleviates any worry, even if it is bad news. It's, hey, we encountered this, but we're working on a plan. We've strategized a plan. We have a plan to move forward, whatever stage you're at. And we have implemented a weekly huddle. So we have various topics that, are running a lot around the year. But at that company huddle, it's every Tuesday at 8:30. Anything important we need to share with the company, we have that we have that standing time that we're going to do that, and then we do a follow up with a weekly digest out to all of our employees. And so over time, they've come to know that even though some are disconnected to us in the office, out in the field, we record it so that they can go back and listen to it if they weren't able to. So yeah, just be transparent and share the information.
All right. Anything in the chat, or are we good to?
But yeah, I don't know if someone raised their hand, but it's down there.
It's okay.
Okay.
Well, I want to spend a few minutes on what I think is the most actionable part of your article, the month by month cadence. If someone steals one thing from today, it should be this rhythm, right? So can you walk us through the monthly schedule and why each date matters?
Sure. So as a sub, ours may look a little different from a general contractor, but our bills are due by a certain date. It's typically the 20th of the month. And so at that point, accounts payable still has invoices coming in. We decided to make it the 10th. You could make it anything you want, but the importance is that you pick a date and you stick with it. So say
Right.
you make it the 5th is your AP cutoff. Anything that comes in after that, it's getting a counting date of the next month. So for us, we made our AP cutoff on the 10th. And so everything is then in. Our WIP summaries are all rolled forward at that point. Job cost is posted so that project managers can go into those monthly job review meetings, which they've got, their own cadence that they go through methodically for that job cost review, which could probably be a whole nother story behind the pages here. So then, of course, from that 10th through the 13th, then we have to get that information back to know what modifications do we need to make then for those WIP entries. And so then I get those somewhere around the 13th or 14th. Again, this all depends on the calendar. And was that on the weekend? Well, of course, we're going to push it a couple days forward if we need to. And then we get that in and post it. But the goal is that that's all done by the 15th. So any reports that are due to the bank can be delivered on time.
What was the hardest part of that to institutionalize?
I think for us, it was really having the operations team meeting every single month. And in that time frame, there were months where they would try to push it, earlier in the month, or that they would want to push it out. And it's like, okay, well, when you're pushing it earlier in the month, that means you're asking accounts payable to get their work done earlier. So helping them understand how, upstream and downstream, what this was all really affecting. And so for us, it was that process, took the time to get worked out, turned into a routine. But thankfully, they saw the value very quickly, and that alone made it much easier.
So you note the importance of being overbilled but not financing the project. What's the simplest way to help operations feel why that matters?
Yeah, so when we're not financing the project, then our cash gets to work harder for us and it pays us back in interest. Obviously, interest gets turned into profit, which could turn into bonuses. Um, so that's one little carrot.
Yeah.
But we don't have to be on our line of credit. So again, if you're on your line of credit, then you're reducing your profit because you're paying interest to the line. So either way, this is really affecting your net income.
Nice. Anything in the chat while we're here? Okay. Cool. Okay.
Once you had that process going, what was the biggest thing that changed for your team?
The biggest thing that changed was just the fact that we were able to have real and accurate monthly internal financials. We knew without a doubt and we could trust month to month where we were. We were not needing to wait for our CPA to give us a review, our 6-month review, and then give us the statements, and then waiting for our year-end audit. We now knew month to month where we were, what did we need as far as backlog. That was the biggest impact.
How do you keep the job reviews from turning into blame sessions? Or do you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So our supervisors are invited to those meetings, and really at this point they have a good rhythm and a routine, and I don't hear any stories of any blaming. But I think if there were, it's just a matter of, this is data, facts are friendly. We're just here working to make this a success for everyone, and just kind of guide that back from trying to point fingers and, well, estimating didn't put this in here, or you've sent me crappy help out on the job site, so how do you expect me to make these labor
Right.
margins? So yeah, well, that might be a different discussion that we can have outside of this meeting, so let's take that offline. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a contractor doesn't feel like they can implement the full cadence right away or at all, what is the minimum things that you think that they should focus on to start with?
Minimum thing. So if you don't have a monthly job review, I would say at least institute it quarterly. Some people rely on their CPA for the WIP schedule at 6 months and year end. But there's a huge amount of value to doing that internally. Monthly is the best practice. I would say quarterly at a minimum.
Okay. All right. Take this part here. Or you want me to?
No, you can.
Okay. So moving into controls, fraud prevention, treasury tools. Even with better reporting, cash can still leak through weak controls, right? This is where discipline becomes protection. So I want to hit purchasing controls and bank fraud tools quickly because these changes the teams can implement in phases. So you describe purchasing cards with guardrails, role-based limits, merchant category restrictions. What guardrails made the biggest difference in your situation?
So we started sending a copy of the credit card statements each month to that cardholder supervisor.
Okay.
And that alone made the biggest difference for us.
Yeah. If a company can only implement, let's say, 2 fraud prevention steps this quarter, what are your top picks and why?
So I recommend to have someone receive your bank statements and credit card statements that don't have any access to either entering accounts payable or cutting checks in the system.
Yeah.
At my company, that's our job cost accountant. Also having your CEO and COO have access to the folder wherever those statements are saved, so just so that people know, hey, they got access, they're looking at them. The second one is to turn on positive pay with your bank if they offer it and you're not using it. That alone is also a huge fraud prevention. And then just ask, sorry, the one extra is just ask questions sometimes that you already know the answer to, but just people knowing that you're asking questions kind of keeps them on their toes too. So it's that whole trust but verify.
Yeah.
If you have a small team, what's the most important thing that you can do to prevent fraud, would you say?
Yeah, I still think it's, even in a small team, you can usually have someone, even if it's someone that you don't think has any bearing on accounting. They don't have to be in accounting. That's kind of the point. Just have them be the one to receive and open and look at your bank statements and your credit card statements. And again, making sure, CEO or president is looking at them also.
Yes.
Got another question in the chat.
Okay.
Already asked, in your monthly cost reviews, what does the agenda usually include? Which financials, variances, or KPIs get the most attention?
So they spend the majority of their time going through all of the different areas, cost codes, and categories to look at where are they going over or meeting budget. Is it labor? Is it materials? Is it subcontractors? Looking at manpower needs, looking at, are they billed ahead? Are they underbilled? And the impact of that. And then there's time for any kind of, interpersonal issues with the contractor. That's kind of our set agenda.
Nice. That's it for the chat?
Yep.
Okay, cool. What do you think the first 24 hours look like as a playbook for if fraud is suspected? What's the first, like, all hands on deck type thing?
So in the article, we put like a template for a business continuity plan. I would say definitely take time to already have that filled out so that you can just access that. So in that first 24 hours, already identify who you would pull into this meeting and know who the appropriate people are that you're going to want to be contacting and getting involved, depending on whatever issue that you're needing to tackle, whether it's outside parties. Is it your banker? Is it your CPA? Is it your bonding company, etc.?
Yeah. All right. So, well, we're coming up on 40 minutes, huh? Before we wrap, I sort of want to bring this down to action because that's what we do in Behind the Pages. The goal is not to scare anyone, it's to help teams close gaps before the next stress test shows up. So let's end with some practical steps. If someone wants to avoid living this story, although they would get to write an article for Building Profits, maybe. So, what's the one thing that they can do in the next 30 days to avoid this?
I would say organize a monthly job review schedule. If you're quarterly, if you're 6 months, I've said it before, but to me, that is huge. Obviously, for that to be successful, though, you've got to have a hard cutoff schedule for your accounting team, AR and AP. Another thing that you could potentially do if you've already got that all buttoned up is go interview a banker that you regularly see at CFMA events. Just having conversations, networking with folks. That is one thing that it can be the ace in the hole that you don't even think you're going to need it, but it's so huge. These connections that we build with each other are huge, and you can't put a price on that.
Yeah. And if you haven't been to a CFMA event, there's a big one coming up at the end of May through June 3rd in Phoenix, Arizona, at our 2026 annual conference. So shameless plug.
Absolutely. And there's going to be some amazing bankers there too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So if you had to boil the message down, what matters most? Cadence, covenants, or controls?
To me, it's the cadence. It's having that process that you refine and you stick with it, and making sure that you are giving attention to your software to make sure that, you have a capital expenditure that's going to pay you back in dividends. You've got to have data transparency. We hear construction is usually one of the last to adopt new technology for various reasons. This is not somewhere to be cheap. Make sure that you are forward thinking and make sure you're putting in those capital expenditures for good software that gives you the transparency.
Yeah. Anything else in the chat, or are we?
If anyone has any final questions.
Yeah.
Feel free to get those in. I'll read them off for you. Or if someone wants to raise their hand, I can let them speak. That's fun too.
Well, and I'll just quickly say that the reason this whole article came about, this is the power of our local chapters. I had a fellow chapter member that reached out to me. This was early last year, and she asked if anyone had advice on what to look for when changing their bank. That's a kind of, that's an easy question. And so I started responding back to her in an email, and my email, just grew, and I had all these things in there for her to think about. I had actually recently just started interviewing another bank, and so it was very fresh in my mind. And so I kind of stepped back from that and thought, wow, this could really be useful to someone else. And could this be a magazine article? So then what I had experienced previously here when I changed banks, a decade ago, and what I learned from that, all these things together, then boom, here we are. A year later, an article was written, and I hope that it will serve as, a template for someone out there that, is going through just thinking about changing a bank. You've got a nice list there at the ready to know what you need to gather. And just a reminder to everyone else of how important it is to have these connections and always have, that person you can call when you never know you might need to. So it's just nice to step back and think of how you may not think that you're affecting so much, but just a simple ask turned into something, really big. And so never hold yourself back from something like that, because then sometimes it's hard for us to kind of dote on ourselves. So that was kind of something that I learned through this whole process is, I do have knowledge, I do have information, and it is shareable, and it can make a big impact in someone else's life.
Yeah.
That's one thing I think that is really special about our members, that you all are willing to help each other, whether it be on Connection Cafe, at a chapter event. You don't always see members in membership organizations that really give to each other in the way that you guys do. So it's really special. And, I enjoy working with you all because I can see that those relationships are so important and deep, and it's just really great that you can get that out of the organization. So
absolutely. And this is just one topic of an endless amount of topics.
Well, thank you, Tori, for being able to turn your tough story into a magazine article and then into a behind the pages thing. It's come full circle now where we're talking about it. So I really appreciate you joining us, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of Behind the Pages. And we'll be back, I think, in April, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
our page 4.
Yep. So we'll send this around. It'll be the recording we can send around to everybody. And thanks again.
Thank you, Tori.
Thank you, Tori.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.